It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
From the Independent Brexit Betrayal March, Tommy Robinson and UKIP lead London protest amid huge police operation. This was 19 hours ago. Police appealed for people to protest peacefully amid disorder. This is while Paris is burning. Now, why is UKIP having this protest? Well, they're having this protest because the elites haven't taken the people seriously. The elites haven't taken the people seriously. They wanted out of Brexit, and they're not listening, okay? Well, then we also have this story here. Nigel Farage unveils plan to form a new party to fight the biggest battle yet for the independence for the European Union. Nigel Farage made headlines last week when he left the United Kingdom Independence Party because of Tommy Robinson's appointment in the party. Here more to talk more about this and everything that's going on overseas. We have Mr. Dan Perkins, who's a foreign policy analyst. He's also the author of the book, The Brotherhood of the Red Nile Trilogy. He's an expert on Islamic history. Dan Perkins, welcome, sir.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. It's always great to have you back. So what's your take on the events? What's going on across the pond?
What's going on across the pond started over 2 years ago when the English people in a referendum decided they wanted to save their culture and leave the European Union. The European Union unelected bureaucrats were forcing changes in British law, and to the point that about 60% of the laws on the books in Britain were dictated by the bureaucrats in Brussels. So the British people had an opportunity to get out and try and get their country back, and they voted much in the same way American people decided to try to get their country back by voting for Donald Trump. The elites, much like what happened with Donald Trump, were outraged that the British people were so stupid to want to leave the European Union. So they have been, for the better part of 2 years, trying to override the will of the people, much like the Democrats have been trying for 2 years to override the will of the people in the United States with the election of Donald Trump. Then you add to that what's happening in Paris and what's happening in France, and now over the weekend in Brussels and in the Netherlands. That is that the European people have begun to understand, and when I say people, middle class, poor, unions, have begun to understand the financial implications of paying for the changes to take care of global warming. And they're seeing it in the increase in price of gasoline and diesel. The French wanted to increase gasoline prices by 12.5 cents a gallon and 28.5 cents a gallon on diesel fuel, which is more prevalent in cars in Europe than it is in the United States. And the people began to say, no, it's not what we want the money to do. And so the whole underpinnings of the elites is under attack, whether it's Brexit in the UK or the global warming and the ability to pay, or the need to pay through the common people for the cost of greening up of France and other countries. It's a basic revolt against the elites in both countries.
And it all seems to have just to me. I mean, I wasn't following this. I mean, I don't think our media wasn't covering it over here in the United States.
No.
But so was it really sudden, or were there other stories that I've missed? Did it just kind of build up and boil over? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm in fact writing a piece on that right now, and what I believe has happened is that when we first started talking about global warming, we talked in terms of theory. We're still only talking in terms of theory, not reality. So with the Paris Accord, it obligated countries to do certain things. Now, we pulled out as the United States, but Paris, France, the bastion of the whole global warming situation, was forced into taking the theoretical into reality, and that took time. It's taken a lot of time, and now we're looking at programs that were evolving from the government, driven by the elites, over the last several years, and now it's moved to reality, and it's moved to funding. And so Maroon, I call him Macaroon, the head of France, he's now saying that he wants to suspend the gasoline and diesel tax, but his government officials are wondering where's he going to get the money to pay for the initiatives in global warming. At the same time all this was happening, our former vice president who invented the internet, Mr. Gore, was having, in essence, a telethon to support global warming. And it was supposed to be a 24-hour telethon. And after 4 hours, it was canceled. He said it was a result of sympathy for the protesters in Paris. The practical reality is that the, quote, scientists were so outraged at the way he was conducting himself on the air, people were canceling, and they canceled it after 4 hours.
Wow.
So this has all been going on, and you're right in your observation. It's not being reported, has not historically been reported in the United States for one very simple reason. It is not part of the mainstream media's agenda. In fact, it's counter to the agenda. The idea that the middle class is going to have to pay for what the elites want in terms of what's going on. You know, two quick examples. When we had the tsunami that destroyed the nuclear power plants in Japan, Germany decided they were going to shut down their nuclear reactors and replace them with wind farms and solar panel farms. And they found out that the efficiency of generating electricity for what they were doing in terms of these two alternative green sources was insufficient. So in order to keep their factories running and people's houses warm and all this, they went into the European grid and they bought electrical power from France, which was primarily generated by nuclear power. Now we've got a situation where they have increased demand, and they're talking about opening up coal mines and starting up some of the coal-fired plants that were shut down, which is a conflict with the global warming people, because coal presents the highest level of CO2 emissions of any energy that you can use. But they're trying to save their economy. Now, we had another alternative in England. Again, you may not have heard this story, but last winter, the culmination of the British government's desire to close the coal-fired plants and replace them with natural gas plants created a problem, because they had a very cold winter and they couldn't get the gas supply to keep the factories and the houses warm because the gas supply was diminishing so rapidly. So they had an energy problem, again caused by the, quote, global warming people, the elites who pressured the government to close the coal plants, convert to natural gas, not knowing that they didn't have enough natural gas to supply. Mm-hmm. I checked yesterday, and the forecast for England is another very cold winter, especially in January, February, and into March. And there are now concerns there's going to be enough natural gas supply to keep the homes and the business running in England. All these things are all part of the global warming process. We're not talking about them in the United States.
No, and I really appreciate, Dan, how you talk about how this doesn't fit with the American mainstream media's agenda, because, you know, European countries, France in particular, they're supposed to be the docile citizenry that's expected and appropriate. You know, for example, if we over here take to the streets and protest a tax increase, 100%, we're going to be called terrorists, even though Antifa actually, you know, does turn violent, and, you know, they want Marxism, and of course they're not terrorists, they're just freedom fighters. But over there, you know, they're supposed to be evolved. They have evolved sensibilities. They're more towards the social welfare part of things, more socialistic,
more politically correct.
More politically correct. But for the people of France to take to the streets over a tax increase is something that, all of the sudden the right in America isn't so crazy after all, are we? There is a limit.
Right. No.
There is a number that's too high. Now, and I'd like for you to comment on that, but also, is it also more about globalism too? It's not, I mean, the fuel taxes and the global warming, but it's also about this idea of globalism and the people in the countries are being left behind.
Well, there's a lot of work in that question.
Yeah, I know it's a broad one.
Just a couple of that's okay. That's all right. Just a couple of quick observations. The original protest 4 weeks ago was on the initial, already in place increase in both gasoline and fuel taxes, and with the announcement by the head of France that he was going to increase them again after the first of the year. But if the American media, which is reporting that the protests are about gas taxes, is not aware or not reporting that it has morphed into an attack basically on the elite structure in France. And Macron is perceived now by the people, at least in this particular protest, as being squarely in the corner of the elites against the middle class of the poor. So it's now evolved not just gas taxes, income taxes, lack of jobs, unemployment 10%. So a whole raft of economic issues and government issues are now thrown into the mix of this protest. And it started off with taxes as it relates to energy, but it's now morphed into an all-out assault on the elites and what they're trying to do in France. It will, and it's spilled in over the weekend, as I said, in Brussels and in the Netherlands. And I suspect we're already seeing a potential in Germany and other countries. So you're seeing a revolt to the, as you said, globalism. And I suspect that while over the weekend we had a production cut in OPEC, the words now are, is OPEC falling apart? Well, the question is, there's supposed to be a vote tomorrow on the European Union exit by the British. Is it possible that the European Union is going to fall apart?
Yeah.
And these are all globalist issues that the global network supported. That's all coming under attack. And it's coming from the middle class. It's not coming from the elite. It's coming from the vast, unwashed middle class and poor who are revolting, just as we are in the United States, still trying to capture our country.
It is incredible. It's almost like everybody has just woken up at the same time. I mean,
yes.
Bringing it back to the original story with the UKIP and their protest against Brexit. You just said France. It's turned into a protest just about their elite culture, and
yes.
that's what it is in Britain. And that's what it's almost like these people have realized. Oh my gosh, we've been conquered. I mean, you've got Britain and France facing essentially the same problem. Okay, I was talking about this earlier. The reason we know that it is globalism, and it's not some myth, it's not some unicorn, it really is globalism, is because so many developed countries across the planet are having the same domestic political issues. Here in our country, it's about immigration and securing our borders. That's the same problem that many people have over in Europe. That's not a coincidence.
Yes. No, it's not. It's not. And I don't know whether if you're married, you have any kids or not, but there's a wonderful, I think a wonderful analogy here. When my children were little, one of the stories they liked to hear me read to them was the emperor had no clothes. Do you remember that? Did you ever hear that story?
Yes. And I do have, I do have a wife and one child, yes.
Okay, good. Terrific. So it's, for your listeners who may have not heard it, it's a simple children's story about two crooks who come to town and try and convince the king that they can spin magical cloth. And they sell him, and his ego lets him believe that they're actually spinning cloth. And everybody in the community, in the town, and the country is afraid to say to the president, the chair, the king, he doesn't have any clothes on. So they go along with the idea that it's okay to believe that the king is naked because he's got this special fabric, and only certain people can see it. So nobody wants to admit until the king is out on parade, one of the children stands up and says, he doesn't have any clothes on. And everybody, the lights go on, and everybody says, wait a minute, what's going on? Well, your observation about why it's all happening at the same time is that there are millions of people all over the world who are like a little boy and realize just how naked they were and how much they had been misled by the elites around the world.
The illusion, yeah. People are aware. They can see it now. Dan Perkins, it's always great to have you on, sir. Again, you can find his stuff at thehill.com. He's also an author. Look up The Brotherhood of the Red Nile Trilogy on Amazon. And Dan, we really appreciate you spending time with us this morning.
Sure. And people can go to my website, danperkins.guru, and get all kinds of stuff.
All righty. Dan Perkins, everybody.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Folks, we're going to take a break.